Dear unknown friend, Christian Hermeticism does not try to compete with religion or science. If you're looking for the true religion, true philosophy, or true science here, you're looking in the wrong place. Christian Hermeticists see themselves as helpers, not leaders. They don't think they are better than those who have faith, scientists, or great artists. They don't hold secrets about future scientific discoveries, like a cure for cancer. In fact, they would be wrong to keep such important information to themselves. They recognize and respect people like Francis of Assisi, who had a strong faith, and believe that anyone with sincere belief can also achieve greatness. Hermeticists know that believers, scientists, and artists often excel in many important ways, and they don't pretend to be superior. They don't have a religion or science to replace existing ones. Instead, they focus on the shared essence of religion, science, and art. Let me give you an example related to the idea of two churches, the Church of Peter and the Church of John. This idea suggests that the Church of Peter, or the papacy, will eventually fade away, replaced by the more free-spirited Church of John. However, John willingly submitted to Peter's leadership and never claimed the role of leader after Peter's death. John's role is to keep the spirit of the church alive until the return of the Lord, not to lead it. Similarly, Hermeticism preserves the shared spirit of all true culture. Hermeticists strive to understand and nurture the spiritual life of humanity. They don't have special privileges in religion, science, or art. Instead, they respect those who excel in these fields. They focus on the common heartbeat that connects all religions, philosophies, arts, and sciences throughout time. Inspired by John, they don't seek to direct these areas, but are ready to support and uplift them, sharing their insight like a sacred act. In essence, Hermeticism is like a catalyst that enriches the spiritual life of humanity. It represents the beginnings of deeper understanding or transformation. This is the spirit of Hermeticism, and with this in mind, let's look at the first major arcanum of the tarot. What is this first card about? It shows a young man wearing a big hat shaped like a figure 8, standing behind a small table. On the table, there are a yellow vase, 3 small yellow discs, 4 red discs in 2 stacks, a red cup with 2 dice, a knife, and a yellow bag for carrying these items. The young man, who is the magician, holds a stick in his right hand and a yellow ball in his left. He holds them easily, without any signs of tension or hurry. What he does with his hands seems natural and playful, not like work. He doesn't even watch his hands. His attention is somewhere else. It's surprising that the first card in the tarot, which represents the beginning of understanding all the other cards, features a magician who performs tricks. Why is this important? The first arcanum, which is the foundation for the other 21 major arcana, is about the relationship between personal effort and spiritual reality. It's first on the list because without understanding it, you wouldn't know how to use the other cards. The magician shows us how to understand and apply all the arcana. He is key to knowing what to learn and do to engage with the spiritual practices represented in the tarot. The first principle of esotericism, or the path to understanding spiritual reality, can be summarized as learn to focus without effort, turn work into play, make your burdens light. This advice is serious, and it reflects the teachings of the Master. My yoke is easy, and my burden is light. Matthew 11:30. Now let's break down this advice to understand the idea of active relaxation, or effortless effort. First, what does it mean to learn to focus without effort? Concentration means directing your full attention to a small area. Many schools of thought, including modern education, therapy, and ancient yoga, agree on this. In yoga, the first lesson is about controlling the mind's distractions. True concentration can only happen in a calm and quiet state. Being silent is essential before you can truly know, will, or dare to act. This is why the Pythagorean school required beginners to stay silent for 5 years. Only those who had mastered the art of silence could speak meaningfully. The same principle applies to practices like the silence observed by Trappist monks during retreats. There are 2 types of concentration: disinterested and interested. Disinterested concentration comes from a will that is free from strong emotions, while interested concentration is driven by passion or obsession. For example, a monk in prayer and an angry bull can both be concentrated, but the monk is peaceful while the bull is driven by rage. Strong emotions can create a form of concentration, but it often leads to obsession, rather than true focus. True concentration is a peaceful act and requires a detached will. This is why yoga emphasizes moral rules and self-control before practicing concentration techniques. Both St. John of the Cross and St. Teresa of Avila often say that the focus needed for spiritual prayer comes from a pure and moral will. There's no point in trying to concentrate if your will is distracted by something else. If your will isn't quiet, your thoughts won't be either. A quiet will helps silence your thoughts and imagination, allowing for true concentration. This is why great ascetics are also great at focusing. However, we're not just talking about general concentration. We're focusing on concentration without effort. What does that mean? Think of a tightrope walker. He is fully concentrated because if he isn't, he could fall. But do you think he's thinking or imagining anything while walking? If he were, he would fall right away. He needs to quiet his mind to maintain his balance. His body's natural systems, like breathing and circulation, take over instead of his thinking mind. This kind of focus is almost miraculous. It's similar to the story of St. Dionysius, who, after being beheaded, picked up his head and walked 2 miles, guided by an angel and a great light. The tightrope walker also has to set aside his thinking to perform his skill, relying on a different kind of intelligence that comes from his body's rhythm. For the tightrope walker, juggler, and magician, their talent is like the miracle of St. Dionysius, because they shift their focus from their head to their heart, changing from thinking with their brain to moving with their body's rhythm. Concentration without effort means moving the focus from the brain to the body's rhythmic systems. The large hat, shaped like a figure 8, that the magician wears, along with his relaxed posture, represents this shift. The figure 8 symbolizes both infinity and rhythm, highlighting the eternal flow of life. The magician embodies the state of effortless concentration, where the focus of the will shifts from the brain to the rhythmic system, allowing thoughts to quiet down and not interfere with concentration. Concentration without effort means reaching a state where focusing feels as natural as breathing or your heart beating. In this state, your thoughts, feelings, and will are calm, and your body is completely relaxed. It's a deep silence where desires, worries, imagination, memories, and busy thoughts are quiet. You can think of it like calm water reflecting a beautiful starry sky. This silence grows like waves, one after another, becoming deeper and more profound. Have you ever experienced such silence? If so, you know what effortless concentration is. At first, this state lasts for moments, then minutes, and eventually longer periods. Over time, this effortless concentration becomes a permanent part of your soul's life, like the continuous prayers at the Sacré-Cœur Church in Paris, which go on while life continues around it. This zone of silence remains even when you're busy or talking. Once you establish this silence, you can draw energy from it for both rest and work. You will experience not just effortless concentration, but also effortless activity. This idea leads to the second part of our principle, transforming work into play. When you have a constant zone of silence, you can breathe in this inner peace, which makes your work feel lighter and more enjoyable. This silence means you are in touch with a spiritual world that supports you. When you find silence in your focused state, you're never alone in your struggles. Spiritual forces are there to help you. This brings us to the third part of the principle, making your burdens light and your tasks easier. Silence indicates a real connection with the spiritual world, which brings you strength. This connection is the foundation of all mysticism, knowledge, magic, and practical esotericism. Practical esotericism is based on the idea that you need to be unified within yourself, having effortless concentration, and connected with the spiritual world, having that zone of silence, for any real spiritual experience to happen. If you want to practice true esotericism, whether it's mysticism, knowledge, or magic, you need to be like the magician, focusing effortlessly and acting with ease as if you're playing. This is the main teaching of the first arcanum of the tarot. It's the key principle for all spiritual practices and serves as the foundation for all other teachings in the tarot. The theoretical aspect of this teaching matches the practical side. Just as effortless concentration leads to unity in practice, the idea of unity among the natural world, human world, and divine world is essential in theory. Understanding that everything is connected is crucial for all knowledge. Without this idea of unity, knowledge wouldn't be possible. The goal of all philosophy and science is to find truth. Truth means understanding how different things connect and relate to a deeper unity. Every search for truth, whether mystical, philosophical, or scientific, assumes this unity exists. Without it, nothing could be known. How could we move from what we know to what we don't know if they weren't related? When we say the world is knowable, we affirm that it is not just a collection of separate parts, but a connected whole, where everything influences each other. Recognizing the connections among all things has led to a specific way of gaining knowledge known as the method of analogy. This method helps advance understanding. Analogy is based on the essential unity of the world and shows that while things may appear different, they are fundamentally connected and share a common essence. The traditional way to explain the method of analogy is well known. It comes from the Emerald Table of Hermes Trismegistus, which states, "That which is above is like that which is below, and that which is below is like that which is above, to accomplish the miracles of one thing." This means that things in the higher realm correspond to things in the lower realm. When looking at time, the formula changes to, "That which was is like that which will be, and that which will be is like that which was, to accomplish the miracles of eternity." This shows that past events are connected to future ones. The first formula, which applies to space, forms the basis of typological symbolism. This means symbols that show connections between higher prototypes and their lower expressions. The second formula, which applies to time, is the basis of mythological symbolism. This means symbols that connect archetypes from the past to their expressions in the present. For example, the magician represents a typological symbol, showing us the idea of the man of spirit. In contrast, stories like those of Adam and Eve or Cain and Abel are myths. They reveal archetypes that appear repeatedly in history and in individual lives. These stories are mythological symbols related to time. These two types of symbolism, based on analogy, create a connection that can be visualized as a cross. Hans Liesegang, a well-known author on gnosis, wrote about myths, saying that every myth tells a story that represents an eternal idea, which can be recognized by anyone who understands the myth's meaning. Mark Haven, in his book on tarot, discusses typological symbols. He explains that our sensations, which represent external movement, don't really resemble the things they symbolize, just like the way sand moves in the desert doesn't truly reflect the wind that creates dunes. He argues that science should see itself as a way to understand symbols. These symbols serve as a universal language that demonstrates the connections between the spiritual world and the material world, showing how all beings are related. Thus, we have two definitions, one for mythological symbols related to time, and another for typological symbols related to space. Both definitions express the ideas of these two kinds of symbolism. The Emerald Table refers to typological symbolism, showing the connection between what is above and what is below. It's important to differentiate between these two forms of symbolism because mixing them up can lead to misunderstandings of ancient sources, including the Bible. For example, some people interpret the story of Cain and Abel as a typological symbol, trying to link it to ideas of forces. But the tale of Cain and Abel is a myth that conveys an eternal idea about history. It illustrates how brothers can become enemies even when they worship the same God, highlighting the root of religious conflicts. This story reveals that the source of wars is not different beliefs, but the idea of equality and the denial of hierarchy. This narrative represents the first revolution, showing that the cause of violence has always been the rejection of hierarchy. Stories like the fall of Adam and Eve, the flood, and the Tower of Babel are also myths. They refer to historical events and convey messages about time, not symbols that reflect the unity of the worlds. The fall of Adam and Eve does not indicate a corresponding fall in the divine realm. Instead, it marks a significant moment in human history that remains relevant throughout time. On the other hand, it would be wrong to interpret Ezekiel's vision of the celestial chariot as a myth. This vision is a typological symbol that reveals the archetypal world. The Zohar, a central text in Jewish mysticism, recognizes this and expresses it well, stating that what is above is like what is below. India has a similar saying in the Vishvasara Tantra, "What is here is there, what is not here is nowhere." Analogy isn't just for magic, astrology, or mystical speculation, it is universal. Philosophy, theology, and science all rely on analogy. Here's how analogy works in logic, which forms the basis of philosophy and science. 1. Classification of objects based on their similarities is the first step in research and relies on analogy. 2. Arguments by analogy can help form hypotheses. For example, Laplace's nebular hypothesis came from noticing similarities in the movements of planets and their satellites. 3. As J. Maynard Keynes noted, scientific methods aim to enhance known analogies to reduce reliance on pure induction. Pure induction relies on simply counting and drawing conclusions from observed statistics. For example, if we see that John, Peter, and Michael are all men who have died, we conclude that all men are mortal. This argument's strength comes from the number of facts we know through experience. On the other hand, the method of analogy adds a qualitative aspect, focusing on what is important beyond just numbers. For instance, we might say, Andrew is made of matter, energy, and consciousness. Since matter doesn't disappear when he dies but only changes form, and energy also changes its activity but doesn't vanish, Andrew's consciousness must also change form rather than disappear. Therefore, Andrew is immortal. This argument is based on the idea from Hermes Trismegistus that what is below, matter and energy, is like what is above, consciousness. If matter and energy are conserved, then consciousness must also be conserved, implying immortality. According to Keynes, science aims to expand the scope of known analogies to rely less on pure induction. This means transforming the scientific method into one based purely on analogy, rooted in direct experience without hypothetical elements. The method of analogy is crucial for science, helping to make discoveries and create useful hypotheses. In philosophy and metaphysics, analogy plays a similar role. Conclusions in these fields often depend on the analogy between humans, nature, and the spiritual world. Two major figures in medieval philosophy, St. Thomas Aquinas and St. Bonaventura, greatly valued analogy. St. Thomas discussed the analogy of being, which is central to his philosophy. St. Bonaventura interpreted the visible world as a symbol of the invisible world, suggesting that the world reflects divine wisdom. Both St. Thomas and St. Bonaventura were recognized as significant figures in the Church, showing that we can openly support the idea of analogy without conflicting with philosophy, science, or church teachings. Moreover, even the Master, referring to Jesus, endorsed analogy through his use of parables and a fortiori arguments. Parables convey analogous truths, while a fortiori arguments use analogy as their foundation. For example, when Jesus asks if a father would give his son a stone when he asks for bread, he uses the analogy of human fatherhood to explain divine generosity. However, a reader might wonder about the weaknesses and dangers of relying on the method of analogy. It's important to recognize that the method of analogy has many downsides and can lead to errors and misconceptions. This is because it relies heavily on experience, and if that experience is shallow, incomplete, or incorrect, the conclusions drawn from it will also be unreliable. For example, when early telescopes were used, people thought they saw straight lines, or canals, on Mars. They assumed these were artificial and that Mars was inhabited. However, better telescopes later showed that these lines were not continuous and were not straight, proving that the original argument was based on a misunderstanding. In the field of occult sciences, Gerard van Rynberg published a table showing various astrological correspondences related to tarot cards. For instance, the seventh card, the Chariot, is said to correspond to different zodiac signs and planets, according to various authors. This shows how the connections made through analogy can be quite relative and vary among different people. However, some correspondences, like those between metals and planets, have remained consistent through ancient, medieval, and modern times. For example, gold is linked to the sun, silver to the moon, and other metals are associated with specific planets. These correspondences have been accepted by many authors in occult sciences, including notable figures like Rudolf Steiner. After 44 years of studying this area, I haven't changed my views on these correspondences. Instead, I found many reasons to believe in their validity. So, while the method of analogy is not foolproof, it can lead to important truths, depending on how accurate and complete the underlying experience is. Now, returning to the arcanum, the magician, we see that the idea of effortless concentration is reflected in the entire card and its details. This card also represents the method of analogy as a theoretical concept. From an intellectual standpoint, using analogy is similar to practicing concentration without effort. It should feel like play rather than work. Using analogy on an intellectual level doesn't require effort. You either see the connections or you don't. Just as a magician or juggler trains for a long time to master effortless concentration, someone who uses analogy must also gain experience and knowledge to recognize these connections easily. This skill is part of fulfilling the task given by the master, who said that one must receive the kingdom of God like a child. Children play rather than work, but they are completely focused and serious while playing. Their attention is undivided, and this is what we need to rediscover when approaching the kingdom of God. The arcanum of intellectual brilliance lies in seeing the unity of all beings and things through the immediate understanding of their relationships, achieved through effortless concentration. The Master didn't want us to be childish. He wanted us to develop a brilliant intelligence and heart that allows us to carry light burdens and make our tasks easier, much like a child does. The magician symbolizes someone who has achieved a balance between the spontaneous actions of the unconscious mind and the intentional actions of the conscious mind, the I, or ego. This state of consciousness combines both the conscious and unconscious aspects of a person, allowing for creative spontaneity and purposeful action. C.G. Jung refers to this balance as individuation, which means integrating the different parts of one's personality. This integration enables concentration and intellectual insight to happen effortlessly, which is essential for success in both practical and intellectual pursuits. Friedrich Schiller recognized this concept when he discussed how intellectual duties and instinctual urges can be balanced through the idea of beauty. He believed that when the true and the desired are combined in what is beautiful, the burdens of truth and justice become lighter. When people appreciate the beauty in what is true, they will love it, and this love makes obligations feel enjoyable rather than burdensome. This transformation allows work to feel like play and enables effortless concentration. However, the first arcanum also carries an important warning. There is a difference between genuine play and mere play. The magician represents both the path to true creativity and the risk of becoming a fraud. Those who confuse a lack of focus with true effortless concentration, or random thoughts with insightful vision, risk falling into charlatanism. The arcanum of the magician has two sides. It encourages us to pursue genuine creativity, while also warning us about the dangers of misleading practices. Unfortunately, many teachers of occultism often mix genuine insights with elements of fraud. We should always keep the first arcanum of the tarot in mind as a reminder to cross from hard work into effortless action and understanding. Yet we must also remember that the further we go into this effortless state, the more foundational work and experience we need to achieve real truth. The magician advises us daily. To perceive and understand, to try and to achieve, are all different things. There are illusions in both the material world and the spiritual world. True knowledge comes from experiences that are confirmed by all types of understanding: sensory, moral, psychological, collective experiences from other truth seekers, and those who have achieved wisdom or sainthood. Academia and the church set clear conditions for those who wish to grow. Follow these guidelines carefully before and after exploring areas beyond hard work. If you do this, you will be wise and skilled. If not, you risk being just a fraud.